employment, and you're already seeing employment falling. Rayner has raised taxes on employment, so you've basically not only increased NI, you've also cut the threshold at which NI is charged. Straight tax on employment. As a result, doesn't even start till April. As a result, employers are employing less people. You're seeing it everywhere, and I'm just waiting for the economy to implode. So Barry, it's all very well to talk about that. The fact is, if the economy implodes, it affects everybody. It affects the people who employ people. It affects the people who work.
I just want you to be straight.
The amount of tax
I just want you to be straight, okay?
Why?
If you say, yes, I do not want to ban zero-hour contracts, I do believe that firing and rehiring people is a perfectly acceptable practice, then say so. Because that's the way you voted. So why don't you tell the British public?
I don't believe in Angela Rayner's bill, which I think is overkill. As I've just said to you, I employ lots of people. We look after our people. It's in the interest of a good employer to look after his staff. We do, and we have people who work for us for 50 years, Barry. So I don't need the state to tell me how to treat people properly. And the problem is we've got too much state. We've got too many do-gooders like you who sit in judgment and tell everybody else how to live their lives. A good society, people find their own level and they work together in a civilized way.
You know what, Rupert?
You don't need a bunch of people who've never run a business telling you how to run it.
I have run a business, as you well know. I ran a business for 12 years in the city of London.
How many of your colleagues?
I ran a business for 12 years in the city of London.
How many of your colleagues
and it was very successful. Thanks very much.
Colleagues?
But my point to you is this. I would far rather people say I'm a do-gooder than that I'm a do-badder. And what your party was being accused of is being a do-badder.
No, Barry, that's not fair. And as my grandfather said, there's much more damage done in society by do-gooders than people who are out and out bad.
Tell it to the 800 people that were sacked by P&O that you did not support.
But can I just,
Incorrect, Barry.
Can I just clarify something? So, for quite some time, to a layperson here, it would feel like the Labour Party essentially ignored reform. I feel like you had a strategy of just ignore them. Then we got reports of what some would call almost like a semi-secret cabinet meeting where the focus was how do the Labour Party respond to reform. You've all come away from that with clearly three prongs. You've got your NHS, your employment stuff, and then you've got your Ukraine and Russia. And whenever you kind of hear this conversation now, they are the three strings that will pull. So let me just ask for example, when it comes to employee rights, a poll, was it 2 weeks ago, I think it was, said that 72% of people value employee rights. So people at home will be saying, I don't agree with fire and rehire and all the rest of it. But are you saying that the only way that employee rights could be respected was via that bill?
Of course not.
Is that what you're saying?
What the bill that I originally introduced into Parliament and that then became part of the employment, the New Deal that we've put through, that was the way that we worked out very, very carefully, actually, with the top employment lawyers in the country, that it would mesh in with every other part of employment law to make sure that if somebody were using fire and rehire tactics, they could not do that without facing serious penalties unless they went through all the set steps.
Yeah,
and so
but that's one element of the bill, though, isn't it? There's lots of different
one element. Yeah, exactly
it's
right,
a key element which they opposed. My point is, it's been the experience for literally hundreds of thousands of people in this country, not just the 800 people at P&O. British Airways were doing it, Weetabix were doing it, Brush Electrical were doing it, British Gas were doing it. All of these
Those are all big public companies, Barry. You quoted big public multinationals, but the actual private businesses, which are the backbone of Britain, which you're doing your best to damage, they look after their staff. They have no interest in treating people badly, because if you treat your staff badly, they don't work properly for you. So, absolutely wrong, Barry. You're quoting multinationals.
All our small business leaders and entrepreneurs credit.
And on the NHS, you asked me about the NHS.
But my point to you, Rupert, is that this is actually a piece of legislation, and it was in response to what Michelle asked, that was very carefully worked through so that it actually meshed with all the rest of the legislation and achieved its very limited objective to stop an employer saying to somebody on a Monday morning, terribly sorry, you're fired, but don't worry, you can come back tomorrow morning, you can have your job back, but we're taking £10,000 off your salary.
Barry Gardner, I would put it to you that you're being very selective in picking making immersive things, because anyone with a brain cell is going to think, actually, the employer shouldn't be able to bin me off and then recruit me again tomorrow unless
Michelle,
we're
I'm not picking them.
But what I'm
He
saying
is.
to you is, but what I'm
He
saying
picked
to you
them to
is,
oppose.
but what I'm saying to you is there have been many employers that look at this employment rights bill and actually have raised concerns about how that land leaves them in terms of as an employer. And by the way, we can all desire all of the employee rights, and I want employee rights as well. But if you've not got the jobs, if you're not employed in the first place, well, you're not going to have any rights, are you? Because you're not employed.
That's
Because
the point I was trying to make, Michelle.
And that's exactly what the legislation allowed.
What legislation?
The legislation that Labour has been putting through that I introduced into Parliament. So it actually says it's always going to be in the interests of the worker to ensure that the company survives. So there's always that get-out clause. But that was structured in the legislation, and if Rupert had read it well and thoroughly, then he would have realised that and voted for it.
What do you make to it at home? Because I know that these things, employee rights, I know it resonates and connects with a great deal of you. Have you looked at this bill? Do you actually sit there and think, if you voted against the bill, and that basically means that you're against workers, you're anti-worker? Do you think it's a bit more complicated than that, or what? Let's continue this conversation after the break. Bit discombobulating. They was agreeing on pretty much everything, these two. They're going to end up best friends, but then normal service was resumed because then we got on to Keir Starmer basically saying that Reform UK are essentially dangerous right-wing politics. I've got a question for you all. Why is it the starting point in society that left-wing politics are somehow good, decent, kind, but if you're to the right of politics, somehow you're dangerous, you're nasty, you're this and you're that? I asked that question because I've just seen reports now. You've got a Reform UK event in Cornwall, which is ticking along quite nicely, so it seems. But I couldn't help but notice that outside you've got protesters, you guessed it, all with their faces concealed, chanting all manner of stuff like Nazi scum off our street and all the rest of it. And this rhetoric that being on the right of politics, somehow you're dangerous or racist or something, what do you think to that?
Well, it's very worrying, Michelle. Obviously, this conference in Cornwall, we've been doing regional conferences, and it's designed to basically communicate with people in various parts of the country, and a lot of people have a lot of interest in what we're doing. I don't consider us right-wing, let alone far-right. We're just trying to bring some common sense to the way Britain's governed. And from my experience of being in Parliament, I would say what's happened is that our governing elite has gone far left, and therefore even common sense appears to be, in their view, far right. And I hope nobody's been hurt in this incident, which has been happening while we've been on air.
Yeah, I think reports are coming in, and I think the conference is all happening and it's all underway and it all seems calm and well. But what do you think about the Prime Minister basically calling right-wing politics like dangerous? You know, you've obviously galvanised yourselves into attack lines. You're basically trying to, this is the thing that I was trying to get at before the break. You know, I get that you guys are threatened by Reform UK, or maybe you might say that you're not. In terms of electorally, I would suggest that you are. You've come up with these clear attack lines. Is there any thought about unintended consequences of some of these attack lines, or are you all just purely focused on how do we quash the electoral threat?
No, look, my view is that this didn't take, you referred to some cabinet meeting where it was discussed. This didn't take a cabinet meeting to focus people's attention. What all politicians should be focused on.
So you're telling me you didn't have a, have a meeting that...
There was a meeting.
No, I'm not
There was a meeting, wasn't there, Barry? Was there a meeting? There was a meeting, I think.
I wasn't at it, but I understand there was.
Yes. There was a meeting.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is every politician should be on the doorstep every weekend finding out what it is their constituents are concerned about. And any politician who had been doing that would know that some of the issues that Reform have championed and taken up are issues that are salient on the doorstep. People are concerned about them, right? Whether it's immigration, right?
Why shouldn't they be?
And of course they should be. There are issues, there are very real issues that we need to discuss. Okay.
I mean, if we win the election through a democratic vote, Barry, do you respect that?
Of course I do.
Right.
Of course I do.
Well,
and to answer Michelle's question about, why is it the right are framed as being more dangerous. I think all extremes, doesn't matter whether it's right or left, if you're at the very extreme...
But you don't regard, or maybe you do you regard Reform UK as being at an extreme?
I think they are the farthest right that we've seen in UK politics for at least 50, 60 years.
How so?
Well, because no other party has, Rupert would accept that they are to the right of the Conservative Party.
I don't think we're necessarily to the right. I think the Tories have gone. They're no longer a Tory party. They've gone to the left.
Okay.
What I would say to you,
I'm
Barry,
sorry,
is that
you
we're
can't
now
really say
polling.
that.
We're now polling above you in the electorate's polls. So do you respect the fact that what we're saying is being supported by the British electorate?
Dive into 888 Casino because it's made to... Oh my.
Respect for the electorate. Okay.
Well, thank goodness for that,
Right.
because everybody ignored their vote in 2016.
I have huge respect for the electorate. I believe that what you are offering the electorate are not solutions. What you're doing is you're highlighting problems that people face. In fact, this is a global phenomenon. It's not just you guys, but it's the richest people in society telling the poorest people that the reason that you are poor is because we're not making enough money.
No, Barry,
And
I don't agree with that. I think, and we've got a lot of work to do, because we are putting forward reasons why Britain is not thriving. And what we've now got to do, because I don't want to be part of a party that wins the election, which I think we will, and then lets the people down. So what we now have to do is come up with properly structured policy and structure.
And you see, that's...
And then we need to explain to people, we're explaining what's wrong, and we then have to explain what we would do differently to put it right. And a lot of that means getting government down in size. Government is crowding out the private sector. It's putting far too many rules, regulations and laws in place by a bunch of people in Parliament who don't know which way is up.
You've just proven my case.
So we're not right-wing, Barry. We're common sense.
Sorry, you've just proven my case, because what you've said is actually... What we don't like is politicians getting in the way of the wealthiest in society.
No, everybody in society.
No, you're talking about the businesses, the business owners, and you're saying that
Barry,
when the politicians out the way, then we can actually
everybody's frustrated with the way we're governed. That's why the polls are going our way.
Well, you are the people that ultimately will decide the next general election. What do you think to it all? I've got a simple request. Let's always do polite, respectful debating, because we all think that we're right, don't we? But we all have different priorities and life experiences and worldviews and so on. May we never stop debating, but may it always be polite and respectful. On that note, thanks, gents. Have a good night. I'll see you all tomorrow night.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Into tomorrow, we can expect some more sunshine, but also a fair few showers. These could be heavy and thundery at times, but temperatures will remain above average for the day.
Back at the Prime Minister today after Sir Keir Starmer accused the Reform UK leader of the party's, quote, dangerous politics. Addressing members in Cornwall this evening, Mr Farage addressed Antifa activists who attempted to disrupt the event, and he also said free speech will prevail.
Let me give a message to Antifa. Let me give a message to two-tier Keir Starmer. Let me give a message to all of them. We will not be cowed. We will not be silenced by anybody. We are the British people, and we want a common-sense government back in charge of our country. We're going to fight for it, and we are going to win.
Elsewhere, US President Donald Trump says the focus is on having a ceasefire in the Ukraine war as soon as possible. Mr Trump made the comments in a speech at the White House alongside the French president, where the leaders have been meeting to discuss the war in Ukraine on the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of the country. Mr Trump said the US has had some great conversations with Russia since he took office on the 20th of January towards that goal, and that Europe should contribute to securing peace. The French President Emmanuel Macron says peace must not mean a surrender of Ukraine. The US President says it's to the benefit of Russia to make a deal.
Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent... this is the right time. It may be the only time. That's a very interesting and horrible situation, and that could evolve into a third world war. We're not going to let that happen.
And former Labour MP Mike Amesbury has been jailed for 10 weeks after he admitted punching a man to the ground in his Cheshire constituency last October. He's now facing calls to quit the Commons. Amesbury pleaded guilty to assaulting 45-year-old Paul Fellows after video footage emerged showing the confrontation. Delivering the sentence today, the magistrate said Amesbury's unprovoked drunken behaviour was too serious to be dealt with by unpaid work. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, it's over to headlines.
France's nuclear shield for Europe. The Guardian, Trump, Putin will accept Europe's troops in Ukraine after ceasefire, and the Daily Express, Reeves urged to stop the state pension being axed. So, more papers to come in a little bit. But first of all, Simon, hello.
Watcher.
How you doing? We've got a very large Telegraph. We could pretty much do the whole show just on the Telegraph.
I wonder whether it was specifically in order to address concerns I'd raised on previous shows that we were given an A4 simulacrum of the front page, and
there's just so much
type
news.
is so dense on it. Yeah, they do manage to cram a lot in there. The big story is taking up the top half of the paper. France's nuclear shield for Europe as against America's nuclear. That's how George W. Bush used to pronounce it. It always amused me. The big picture there, the photograph, which a lot of the papers have gone for, is Trump and Macron looking surprisingly chummy and matey and grasping hands there in a kind of bro-like...
It looks like fun war.
Yeah, a little bit of a kind of locking... I don't know whether Macron was avoiding... Trump is apparently a bit of a squeezer, isn't he? He likes to really go for the locker room, the bully starts. Anyway, more importantly, the actual text of the story is more concerned with France's stepping up on the European front and possibly deploying fighter jets carrying nuclear weapons onto German soil if America withdraws its NATO armaments, planes and bombs and so on. I mean, this is all a lot of repositioning going on, of course, in the last few days, and that's been reignited by the German election. Friedrich Merz, who is expected to be the next German Chancellor, has a substantial majority, but he will still be in coalition with the outgoing Schulz. He is quite keen that the French and the British provide his protecting wing now. Funny how it goes around, isn't it? I don't think it would be really unreasonable for Germany to start paying for its own defence at this point and possibly signing a secure contract with BAE.
Do we need to be building more nukes?
Well, probably, yeah, probably we do.
But then saying that Ukraine, this whole thing started, Ukraine gave up their nukes under the proviso that they would have security guarantees.
And all the time people say, oh, Russia's being degraded, it's exhausted its stocks. Well, that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. It might mean that they are inclined, if they're in a tight corner, to resort to that. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel reasonably reassured at the moment that everyone seems to be sort of fronting up to the challenges at any rate.
Yeah. Lewis, more big news. Kemi Badenoch's finally making a decision maybe about the ECHR.
Oh, we're going to that. Badenoch in threat to quit ECHR. I mean, who is she? She's a loser, too. These are the loser parties of Europe. We're being run by a party of... Macron has like 20% the vote. He's like a nobody, Macron.
She's not in power.
And she also is... She wants to be in power, but she doesn't even... She has 20% too. And the same thing, that German guy, Merz. He's a loser, too. He's going to bond with some leftist party. Do you think that's going to make the Germans happy? No, they're going to say, well, these guys are losers. All of Europe, Donald Trump is so right, and I don't think the Europeans understand that this is a continent run by losers. All losers. Macron's a loser.
What about a continent?
She's threatening. She's not in power. She will never get in power. The Tory party is dead. They are dead. They don't have the will. The will of the people don't support them. The people who watch this channel don't like them. And you take a look at Keir Starmer. He's a loser too. He's got all these people voting for him, but they don't like him. They just just didn't like Badenoch's party.
Well, he's technically he's a winner. Well, it wasn't Badenoch's party at the time.
But it is her now. All she could do is say, we're getting out of the ECHR. You have my word on it.
Well,
That's
Simon,
what she
we've
has to
talked
do.
about this before.
Yes.
We've talked about how she sort of held back a bit and assessed the data, and this seems to be her now coming to the conclusion, probably on the back of Telegraph's daily exposés of ridiculous judgments about the immigration.
Well, yes, that certainly would be part of the calculation, and is why the Telegraph have put it on the front page, probably to prove that they've managed to snag her. I suppose also, obviously, to respond to Reform galloping ahead in the polls and getting ahead of them, because Reform are very much about Britain deciding its own rules on who gets to stay and who gets to live here and who gets to go home. I do also find it quite interesting that, of course, as the hard right or the, let's say, immigrant skeptic parties in Europe gather pace, I haven't heard whether Germany will consider getting rid of the ECHR or whether any other countries would. Of course, it's seen as being the other shoe that drops after Brexit in some
I think
regards.
Italy in particular has had some problems.
I think
in terms
so,
of their
yeah.
Albanian program, sending people to Albania for protests.
The obvious thing to do really would be to revisit the whole thing as an international community and redraft it to confront the realities of the 21st century, because we all know it was essentially written, in the aftermath of the war.
It's written by loser parties who are in control of loser Europe, and it's time for Britain, who were the last winners.
Well, it was written by literally the winners of World War II.
Britain wasn't the winner of World War II. The only winner they had, Britain had a very strong friend, the United States of America, and happened to speak the same language as them. So it seems like they were the winner, Britain.
Fair enough. Look, we've got lots of news. I just want to point out one more story. We're going to do, there's a thing about BBC's cameraman for Gaza film, glorified October 7th massacre. We are going to cover that story in a bit. I just wanted to point out that this information was out probably about a week ago.
Yeah.
So the fact it's now on the front page is something that was revealed by David Collier, I think, about a week ago, who's this independent journalist. It shows you the difference between social media news and news out.
Well, this again, I think, is Kimmy Badenoch, isn't it, picking it up and saying that if the BBC don't get its house in order, they will not support the licence fee when it's revisited in 3 years' time.
Kimmy Badenoch has to say we are going to defund the BBC. That's what she has to say. But she's not going to say it because she's part of the liberal.
She's pretty much said it, but sorry, and there's one more thing I want to talk about.
She didn't say it. She said we would consider it, like that's a threat.
Well, I think the considering is a good thing. Sorry, Lawrence, I just want to say one more thing, because we are going to get onto that story, and I do want to hear your opinion about it. But there's one more story here, which is, again, because this whole point of the show is stuff that no one's heard yet. Ofcom cracks down on hyper-masculine web.
Yes.
Now, that is a big story. That's gonna be big. It's just a tiny little thing there, but you can see it's one of those things, Ofcom overreach, arguably, where they're now saying that they expect social media companies to be proactive and shutting down people like Andrew Tate.
You're saying overreach. Ofcom is it goes against the First Amendment of the United States. It's like, what is there, some kind of evil...
We're not in the United States, I should point out.
I know, you shouldn't point it out, but it's like a shock to me. It's like this should not be an Ofcom. Ofcom shouldn't be regulating.
Well, I don't know. I think that we should have media regulation.
Regulating on the internet. Why should they be regulating the internet? I can understand them saying, well, we're in charge of broadcast.
Well, they provide a service, but the point is, on this particular... Well, they do provide a service. The whole point is...
It's like saying the Stasi provides a service by keeping an eye on people.
All right. Well, look, the point is that I think is going to be a big story. Do you have anything to say about it, Simon?
It's interesting you say people like Andrew Tate. I mean, I don't know who's number 2, let alone like a top 5.
Lewis Schaefer.
Andrew Tate.
That's hyper-masculinization there.
It's Andrew Tate, Andrew Tate's brother, and
Lewis. Fair enough. The Guardian, then, Lewis, please.
The Guardian. Here's the Guardian. Putin will accept Europe's troops in Ukraine after ceasefire. I mean, will he accept it? Is he going to keep on going? He's going to keep on going because that's what they do. That's what the Russians do. The Russians are the last imperial force in Europe, and I think it's making the loser Europeans. There are winner Europeans.
Who are the winners?
The winners are people who are fighting against Starmer, Macron, Merz. Maloney could be a winner. Orban is a winner. I mean, the fact is, it's a picture of this horrible.
Pension gives me the tool.
We know that Keir Starmer is a loser.
So, sorry, and just back to the story, Simon. Putin's been very clear about this. He's saying no to any kind of European troops on the ground in Ukraine, but Trump is being quite adamant. No, that is possible. That will happen.
I mean, I think that it's very difficult, as I've said before at the moment, to stick a pin in any given moment in these negotiations, especially with Trump blowing around all over the place, like trying to rig a sail in a gale, trying to understand where he stands on anything. He is making wild assertions about what he has managed to extract from Putin, guarantees that he'll accept boots on the ground. He now seems to be cozying up quite comfortably with Zelensky, who only 2 or 3 days ago he gave a 2-star review that read like a 3.
4%.
Yeah. A moderately successful comedian.
He's negotiating with the thing. Of course he doesn't believe Trump doesn't know what's
By the way, we're comedians, so I think we can all... No one's really talked about that. No one's talked about this particular angle, but like being called a dictator, being saying you only got 4%, I think that wouldn't bother him. Being called a moderately successful comedian, I think that one cut.
He didn't put it in inverted commas. We get that on Twitter.
No, it's an insult to be called a moderate.
No, of course, that's what I'm saying. It's like the greatest insult. I think that would hurt most of all. Let's go to the Daily Express piece, Simon. Something not Ukraine related.
Yes, this is a brand new story which just arrived on the front pages, had no sort of lead up to it. But apparently it seems there's a concern that as pensioners are getting more money, because their pension is, of course, linked to every possible index conceivable from the S&P 500 down to inflation in this country, including school fees, that it's gone up to just 6-7 quid shy of 12 grand next year, and from April of this year rather, and that is taking them very close to the point at which it will be taxable, because that threshold has not moved. So it's simply a little alert to say that if the pension's going to go up, then obviously the tax threshold should go up as well. Although there are a large number of pensioners in this country, of course, who will be taxed because they have other earnings as well. And I mean, a lot of people feel that the pension system in this country could do with a significant overhaul, because a lot of them are not the least well-off people by any means. But
like Lewis, you get like 5 pensions, don't you?
I get a pension from this country, believe it or not, which was a surprise.
right,
No, because you haven't paid any taxes here.
It was a surprise to me. My accountant should have said, you got to put some money in, and she didn't.
but you get one from the New York Police Department as well, right?
I was a cop for 22 years. No one knows this about me because they can't imagine. What is that song? They've got a cop from the police.
Singing singing Galway Bay.
Oh,
That's
yes.
it, yeah. Before you end up in the drunk tank.
That's true. No, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, I feel bad for English people because you're being screwed. Someone's got to fight for the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes.
You got it in there.
Celts.
And you got in a little semi-swear word, which I'll
What did I say?
I don't want to repeat
Jutes.
it.
I think that's all right. I don't think it's a swear word.
Let's have a look at some more front pages then. The Times, Trump invites Zelensky to secure peace in weeks. The Metro, no hiding place for predators. And the Daily Star, we're going to need a bigger nuke. So, Lewis, the Times, let's leave off Zelensky. I think that's the same story. But what about this giant of the arts unite against theft by big tech companies? Did you manage to glance at that?
Yes, I did. It's a fantastic story. Joining the arts unite against theft by big because the AI thing. It's you ask for a picture of Louis Schaefer. Where are they getting the picture of Louis Schaefer? Somebody is losing this way because they're taking this image. But what is it? It's just an image on a computer. It's just dots on a screen, and they're so protective.
No, but when it's music, when it's literature, the idea is you write a book and then AI is going to learn your style.
And your kids should be getting money for this for years. I think
well, maybe you should be getting money though.
Or maybe I should be.
You've got people like Tom Stoppard here.
Or maybe they should say it's not quite as worth as much as you think. But they've made it. It goes in America for 75 years. Trademark. My father was a trademark lawyer.
Yeah, and that's what then you went into the police.
I think for the time being, I mean, given the amount of the sums that change hands for the rights to songbooks, the Queen songbook went for over $1 billion recently. I think one of the, and I think that is almost entirely because it's so popular at sporting events. I don't know where else it goes. I can't imagine it's just from shopping malls or whatever. But certainly, if you recognise a certain piece of music, or of course, if you want to put on a play, or if you want to put on, if you want to sell books with an author's name on the front, all those kind of intellectual intellectual property rights are quite secure for now. The ability to ape a certain kind of style is obviously going to get much more sophisticated soon, and I think that going forward, you know, the chances of new writers having any hope of earning the sort of money that previous writers have done for writing screenplays. I mean, my wife went to see the new Bridget Jones movie this weekend.
Humble brag.
She said it was. Is that a humble brag? She said it was so dreadful. She did actually wonder whether it had been written by an AI, just that had been sort of given half
No, it
dozen
would have been
prompts.
good if it was written by an AI.
Well, I did. I mean, that was my response to it, to be honest. Yeah, but I mean, these are huge names, and funnily enough, Helen Fielding, who wrote Bridget Jones, is among them. But Lloyd Webber, Kate Bush, Paul McCartney. It's great that these people are getting behind it. But if the last 50 years has taught us anything, it's that you cannot put technology back in the bottle. It's coming, I think. And
well, if they're talking about, I think the whole story is that they're rewriting these 300-year-old copyright laws because we're so desperate to attract AI companies to this country. We're just going to give away all of our cultural output for free. That's what it sounds like anyway. And there's another interesting story, we don't need to comment on it, but just how audiobooks could inspire pupils' passion for literature. I think that's a really interesting idea of anything that's going to engage under 18-year-olds and get them into literature.
They don't have to read.
I consume at least 80 to 90% of the books that I consume now are through audiobook. I do read. I read magazine, but far more an audiobook is so much easier.
Yeah, but we need to teach kids how to read.
Teach them how to listen.
That's what it is. This is an article about let's sell them something a different way.
Lewis, very quickly though, would you mind just looking at the Metro? So no hiding place for predators. It's about name changes. Of course, people don't know that you used to be called something different.
I did. You could go to Wikipedia and find out what Don't tell them that. They want to think that I'm an American.
Detective Inspector Louis Schaefer.
So it's a crackdown. Crackdown on sex offender name changes. I didn't read this. I mean, I'm tired of lying. You know I didn't read it. That's my story.
All right. Five. Well, everybody. Okay.
Are you trying to embarrass me? You're always trying to embarrass me.
I'm sorry, Liz.
If they're saying no hiding place for predators, they're not allowed to change their names. If they really wanted to stop them, they should brand them on the forehead. That would be the obvious way.
You're going hardcore. Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. And finally, we've got Daily Star. Let's not even cover it. But we're going to need bigger nukes. And actually, if there are asteroids coming, it's only nukes that are going to save us. So maybe all those people, trying to save the world by getting rid of nukes, maybe they were onto the wrong cause there.
It's possible. I like the phrasing, a huge asteroid bothering Earth will need to be diverted. Using that, says a boffin who knows a thing or two. I mean, they're really...
Right, that's on the front page.
Deutschland Party, or AfD, has declared the blockade against the far right is undemocratic. That comment came after her party doubled its vote to come second in the country's election. Germany's likely next leader said the AfD's election success was a final warning to democratic parties to work together. So Friedrich Merz of the centre-right CDU came out on top with Germany's best election turnout for 40 years. The AfD took second place and the SPD, the party of outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz, sank to its worst result in decades. This map shows the stark national divide. The CDU is grey, AfD is light blue. And many people in what was East Germany have flocked to the far right, feeling fed up and ignored by mainstream parties. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins has this report.
He is the man tasked with fixing Germany. Friedrich Merz, the likely next chancellor, preparing to make a government in a country where the far right is now the second biggest political force. For many, an unthinkable result after Nazi rule.
The AfD has now doubled its vote share. That is the last warning signal to all the centrist parties in Germany. It means we need to find solutions together.
His preferred coalition partners, the Social Democrats, are still smarting from their worst ever result. There will be no invite for the second place AfD. A so-called firewall prevents pacts with the far right, much to their leaders' frustration.
Is the firewall fair? No, it's completely undemocratic, the firewall. But let's see what's going to happen. Thanks for your question.
A move which Alice Weidel later told journalists ignores the will of the people.
Friedrich Merz has decided to stick to his stance of blocking the AfD. We consider this blockade to be undemocratic. You cannot exclude millions of voters per se.
And who are those voters? The AfD dominated in East Germany, here in Thuringen, getting almost 40% of the votes. Support in part fueled by resentment that 35 years after reunification, wages are still lower than the West and many people feel forgotten. It's hard to overstate just how shocked some Germans are by these results, but fed up and feeling unheard, people flocked to the far-right AfD, which secured its best ever result, partly by converting non-voters and young people to its cause. The CDU lost around 1 million voters to the AfD. Party faithful are clear what they need to do to win them back.
It says that we need to work on a lot of problems in Germany, especially on migration, the economy and bureaucracy.
They are attractive to a certain segment of voters, and that needs to be respected. I think the problems that they address need to be solved.
Fail to address these issues, and these could be the final celebrations for Germany's centrists. The far right are waiting in the wings, ready to seize power. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Berlin.
A former Labour MP has become one of the very few MPs in the modern era to be sent to prison. Mike Amesbury was sentenced to 10 weeks jail for punching a man in the street. If an appeal against the conviction fails, there could be a by-election. Our political correspondent Liz Bates reports from Cheshire.
Here to face the consequences, Mike Amesbury, the MP for Runcorn and Helsby, arriving at Chester Magistrates Court today, where his political status didn't afford him any special treatment. As he was handed a 10-week prison sentence, 40% to be served with a further 12...
In People's Postcode Lottery's March draws,
Fellows was angry about the closure of a local bridge. Then suddenly, a punch to the head. The judge said only the intervention of others had prevented the injuries from being much worse.
And you won't threaten the MP ever again, will you?
Oh, is it Mike? Is it Mike? He's the local MP, Jono. Get him on camera. Get him on camera, Jono. He's the local MP.
This is the very spot where the incident happened, in the small town of Frodsham in Cheshire, where Mike Amesbury not only lives but has served as the MP for 8 years. But that could be about to come to an end, because it's now very likely this will trigger a recall petition. If 10% of his constituents sign it, that will force a by-election. He could be out of office within a matter of months.
It was only 6 months ago that people here voted for him to be their Labour MP. So what do they make of it all?
Yeah, I think 10 weeks is probably about right. I think that he's well deserved.
And do you think he should stay on as the MP?
No, I don't think so. I think that should be it for now.
If he's allowed to stand, then yeah, because he's done a good job so far.
Do you think?
Yeah, he's just let himself down by that one incident.
A prison van is not how any MP wants to end their political journey. Mike Amesbury, likely to appeal today's sentencing and keep fighting for his freedom and his career, will hope it's not over just yet. Liz Bates, Sky News, Cheshire.
Okay, let's get you up to date with the latest sport now. Here is Jessica.
If it would seal a peace deal with Russia.
Yeah, he wants NATO membership. We have just seen that Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, backer of Ukraine, is there live in Kyiv and joins us now. Very good morning to you, Mr. Johnson. Well, this is a bit of a surprise that you've turned up in Kyiv. It's a big day, of course, because world leaders are having this call about what to do about Ukraine. What do you think should happen? What do you make of what President Trump has said? And what would you advise Prime Minister Keir Starmer to say to President Trump this week?
First
first of all, I think that on what you're hearing from the White House and a lot of people in America about the responsibility for the war and blaming Ukraine, saying Ukraine started it, this is Orwellian, right? You might as well blame the girl for attacking the shark in the opening reel of Jaws. It's just total rubbish. Ukraine is the victim. But if you look at what's actually happening today here in Kiev, there is a very interesting development, because I believe that we're very close to getting this minerals agreement signed between the United States and Ukraine, and that commits the US not only to future financing of Ukraine, but also to a free, sovereign and secure Ukraine under Donald Trump. And that is not to be sneezed at. That's a very, very important commitment. It also, as it happens, spells out in the agreement that Russia is the aggressor in this war. Now, people will say, oh, this deal is extortionate for Ukraine and America is being too rapacious. But not a penny can flow from this investment fund that is going to be set up unless you have a free, sovereign and secure Ukraine. And don't forget, a sovereign country is a great, great thing. A sovereign country can decide which clubs it wants to join, like NATO. A sovereign country can decide which troops it wants to invite onto its soil to help protect it. And that, to answer your question, Susanna, about my advice to Keir Starmer and the UK, now is the moment for us to step up and do what I think that Trump wants Europe to do, and that is show how we have a plan to help secure Ukraine. And that's going to mean, I believe, UK troops are going to mean French troops, troops from other European countries. They won't be there in a war-fighting role, but they'll be there to provide a sense of security and reassurance to the Ukrainians in the context of that peace deal.
Mr.
And
Johnson,
that is entirely the right thing for the UK to do.
Mr. Johnson, I just want to be crystal clear about what you've said. You're saying that from your contacts on the ground out there, and boy, have you got contacts in Kyiv, you're telling us that you think that America and Ukraine will sign a deal in the next day or so to give America access to minerals in Ukraine.
It's my hope that they will. I can't absolutely be sure that that is going to happen. There are various drafts that have been floating around over the last few days. The only point I'm trying to make is that when you look at this deal, when you look at what it says in black and white about the American commitment to Ukraine, to the freedom, sovereignty and security of Ukraine, when you look at what it envisages for the long term for Ukraine, that's integration with the West, economic integration with the West, a big partnership with the most powerful economy in the world, that's positive for a country that wants to be free from Russian control. That's positive, in my view, for Ukraine. Now, yes, it is a good deal for the United States as well, but then don't forget what we had to face in 1940-41 with the Lend-Lease deal. We had to give up a huge amount, bases in the Caribbean, in Newfoundland, Bermuda, so on. We got a load of rust bucket destroyers in exchange, and we stopped paying. You know, the UK taxpayer stopped paying back the United States for Lend-Lease in 2006 when Ed Balls was Economic Secretary to the Treasury. So, you know, America has a history of demanding a price for its support. And I from where I sit today, where I stand today, I think that price for Ukraine is reasonable. I hope this deal goes ahead. Anyway, I've got to love you and leave you.
As a former Prime Minister, perhaps you can give us a comment on this.
Yes.
How do you deal with an American president who says that black's white? How do you talk to him?
Well, you've just got to, you've just got to keep knocking the ball back over the net. I mean, this is crazy stuff, but, you know, look at and I agree, it's Orwellian, but you've got to look at what is actually being proposed. And I think to a certain extent, there's deal-making going on, there's brinkmanship, but when you look at the potential of the agreement, I think that it's positive for Ukraine. And don't forget, the fundamental loser in all that is going to be Putin, because what Putin wants is Ukraine to be a vassal state of Russia, right? What this deal envisages is an economic partnership with America, and the two things are simply not compatible. This is binary, and the United States is giving Ukraine
the chance to choose a future with the West and with the United States, and I think that's positive.
Okay. Or not so cordial, as both men did the clasp and yank handshake, an attempt to demonstrate male dominance. At the customary fireside photo op, both men were trying to give the impression that any divisions over Ukraine could easily be resolved.
I'm here as a friend because through centuries we've been friends, and we are personal friends, as you mentioned it, because we work very well together. And I think the US and France always stand on the same side, the right side, I would say, of history.
The deal for America to exploit Ukraine's mineral resources as payment for military aid is apparently near completion.
I will be meeting with President Zelensky. In fact, he may come in this week or next week to sign the agreement, and which would be nice. I'd love to meet him. Would meet at the Oval Office. So the agreement's being worked on now. They're very close to a final deal. It'll be a deal with rare earths and various other things, and he would like to come, as I understand it, here to sign it, and that would be great with me.
And maybe a trip to Moscow to see his friend Vladimir Putin.
If this all gets settled out, which I think it will, sure, I would go there, sure. And he'd come here, too.
Today in Kyiv, President Zelensky and his wife were marking the 3-year anniversary of the Russian invasion. Ukraine never says how many soldiers have been killed, but is believed to be more than 100,000. A dozen European leaders were there to show their continued support. A video conference enabled President Trump and President Macron in Washington to hear a direct appeal from President Zelensky.
Our teams are already working productively with the U.S. on economic agreement, which we hope to sign in Washington. And President Trump, we would really like to hear from you, because all our people, all our families are very worried. Will there be support from America?
Other Western leaders see Mr. Trump's refusal to condemn President Putin for invading Ukraine as a potential license for China to invade Taiwan, or any other leader to eye up some tempting real estate.
24th of February, a free and sovereign Ukraine is not only in the European interest, but it is in the interest of the whole world. Because the autocrats around the world are watching very carefully whether there's any impunity if you violate international borders or invade your neighbor, or if there is true deterrence.
The Prime Minister, due in Washington later this week, was announcing more sanctions on Russia, even as President Trump would like to lift those already in place.
So today we're announcing the UK's largest packet of sanctions since the early days of the war, going after Russia's shadow fleet and going after companies in China and elsewhere who are sending military components.
In Semibratovo, population 6,000 northeast of Moscow, they've erected a monument to the 11 young men the village has lost in Ukraine. Cemeteries across Russia tell the story. Maybe twice as many Russian as Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in 3 years of war. As yet, there's little protest, even if some Russians may silently wonder what they're fighting for.